All right, hello everyone. Today we are going to talk with Troy, aka TSAT. For those of you in the forum that know him, he has been around for a while. Although it's been about 18 months since we last talked, we will link to those previous conversations because I think they're super interesting, and I think this one will kind of be a good triumvirate to that conversation.
Right.
Let me kind of give a quick summary for anyone that doesn't know you in our past conversations, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. So your wife is the one that started selling on eBay and online. She convinced you, or you guys decided together that you would quit your job. You're an accountant, I think, and to join her full time. And the two of you ramped up this crazy online business, and you have this successful store, and you sell mainly clothes and some vintage stuff.
Yes, clothes, shoes, and some vintage hard goods. And when we started, it was pretty much all hard goods. I would go out with her and love supporting her the business, and I was interested. So I kind of brought the clothing side in because we would always shop the outside of the store where all the hard goods are, and then there was this big section in the middle that I wanted to kind of go in on and say, okay, there's some higher turnover stuff that we can do there. So.
Right, because I think the reason why our past conversations are interesting, anyone that's who wants to dig back into them, is that you're a real numbers guy. So you're bringing this level of efficiency to eBay that I think a lot of kind of scavengers might not bring. And clothes was something where you really saw, hey, I could buy this for $5, sell it in 2 weeks, and make $15. And if I do that 500 times, I'm going to make a lot of money.
Right, right. And I think it's just where you're inclined to. I mean, I grew up a numbers guy. I went to school for it. It's kind of where where my mind and how I see things, because numbers are what they are. They really can, if you kind of know the language of them, they can tell you the truth of a business. And granted, yeah, there's some resellers that are into numbers and some that aren't so much, and that's okay. I think you need to have at least a little bit of a basic knowledge just so that you really understand what the time and the effort that you're putting in is actually yielding you. And if you're not at least kind of peeking under the hood and seeing how you're doing, you may be fooling yourself a little bit. But nobody, there aren't a lot of folks that go into and take the big, huge, deep dives like I do. But I do that so that I can help make us more efficient and more profitable too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I think eBay maybe attracts definitely kind of more artist types that are just kind of in it for the creativity, and they're interested in the treasure hunt and the scavenging. And then the business part, I feel like a lot of scavengers kind of hope it just kind of works out. And oftentimes I think that they're just one step ahead of their cash flow, kind of. Basically, it's no different than the guys you see at flea markets. They sell the back of their car. As long as they got enough cash to fill up the gas and feed themselves till next Saturday, they're good to go. And
right. Yeah, I remember you mentioned that before, where you kind of see yourself that way. Hey, as long as I got cash in the bank, and I kind of know I'm good. And there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, but at least you're taking it back to, here's my cash in the bank. You know what I mean? What it takes to do to put more cash in the bank, and more importantly, for your lifestyle, how much cash is coming out of that bank, not only to support your business, but also to support your lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think that we're a little bit step ahead of the guy who sells at the flea market.
Yeah, you're more of a business owner, and obviously that's obvious. I mean, you've got a successful eBay business. You've got a couple of real estate ventures already, with your Airbnbs, and you're working on something else coming up too. So you definitely, I mean, you kind of maybe downgrade yourself a little bit, but I think you might want to give yourself a little bit more credit because you've run some numbers and you know what it takes to run a successful business, or business is in your case. So, I mean, there's something to be said for that, Jay.
Well, let's talk about numbers real quick. So I think what we're good at is I know my expenses. So that's really important. I think a lot of scavengers don't know their expenses, and then they get overwhelmed by their expenses, and they realize they're spending more than they make. So I know my expenses, so we always make more than what we spend.
Right.
You, though, your numbers were always interesting when you were posting on the forums that you were doing future statistics that I
Right.
I always had trouble understanding how that was happening, but you were trying to predict where your business was going based on what you're doing now.
Absolutely. And you know what? I still do it today. I've got one big sheet, and I generally only predict kind of the months. I've got one big, massive numbers geek type spreadsheet where I basically have a full monthly, P&L, as well as, how much inventory we have, how much we're planning on buying, how much we're planning on selling, what our anticipated sell through rate is, and what our anticipated average selling price is. I have that by month for every month for the last 4 years, as well as at least 1 year in the future. And the top half is the forecast, and the bottom half are the actual. So I can always kind of say, okay, here's what I'm predicting. And then down below it, I can say, and here's how things actually have been shaking out, so that I can constantly keep tweaking my forecast and get a good prediction of what our business is going to do.
Now, what you're doing, is that pretty typical of what someone like you does in a normal corporation? I mean, is that
Oh,
the
absolutely.
okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Because what you're always wanting to do, and especially since this is a cash flow business, you're always wanting to say, okay, how are we trending? And if we're going to do things, especially if you're going to do things different in the future, what does that do to our numbers when we make those changes? You can sit there and say, I can predict with I mean, I'm generally, I'm within a couple $100 each month of what I thought our revenue was going to be, or what I thought our profit was going to be, although unfortunately not as much for the last 4 months.
Right. And we're going to talk about that because I think that's going to be interesting. Now, my question, and this is the thing that always confuses me, and maybe this is the artist side of me. How can you predict future sales? Just because if you sell 10 shirts this week, I mean, how could you know how many you're going to sell in 4 weeks?
Well, what it'll do, you know, I always do say, I preface this because I've spent a lot of time in financial planning and analysis. Every forecast is actually wrong. It's just where and how much. So the key is making a forecast that is at least reasonable. Like, I can't tell you what's going to sell. I can't tell you if it's a shirt. I can't tell you if it's, necessarily a suit, but I can tell you, okay, based on our past numbers, we're going to sell X percent of our inventory every month. How do I know that? Well, that's what our sell through rate is telling me. If I have a sell through rate of 12% in a month, and 14% the prior month, and 14 and 14 and 12, these are my actual numbers, then by knowing that, I got a pretty good gauge of saying, guess what it's probably going to be next month? It's going to be in that same line. So by using months, I'm kind of getting out of the, what's going to sell today or even this week, but you're kind of smoothing things out a little bit. And I've never really taken it all the way to the level of, were I to get more detailed, I would actually start splitting that number in three, saying, here's how many clothing items I'm going to sell, and here's how many shoe items, and here's how many hard goods. Those are the three basic categories I track a little bit. If I wanted to take my forecasting even more, I'd say, okay, how many of those have I been selling in the past? What is the average sell-through rate of those? What is the average selling price of those? And I can probably get even more accurate in my forecast by doing it to that level. But you're just using the past, you're just using averages, and you don't know dead on. But I mean, I can tell you here, just looking at my actuals, December average selling price 29.87. Before that, 31.22. Before that, 29.53. Before that, 28.95. Before that, 28.75. Hey, you know what? If I pick about $29 for my selling price, I'm going to be pretty close.
Got it. Okay, yeah. So people hearing this, they'll be either people who have never done anything like that and are like, I have no idea, and then there are people who probably work in this kind of
Right.
who do accounting who are like, that's brilliant, to bring that level of specificity to selling online, which people normally I don't think do. Two questions for you.
Sure.
So is the predictability easier with something like clothes and shoes that's more kind of homogeneous versus all the weird kind of vintage items?
I think so now, because you might get a really big pop. I think the biggest thing that will make it change is the variation in what you're selling and what your selling prices are. So if you've got, if half of your store is selling at $100 and half of your store is selling at $10, okay, depending on which side of the ledger, this is what's called mix variance. Depending on which side of the ledger you're going to sell more of in that 1 week, that can swing you wildly one way or the other. So it makes it a little bit harder to predict, but at least when your actuals come in compared to your prediction, you have a pretty good gauge as to, well, why was I off? Was it because I have more high things or more low things? But, just taking a look, let's look at our hard goods because I do keep track of some things for just hard goods. Our hard goods selling price is the one that is the most variable. If I look back at past weeks, 29, 36, 48, 29, 18, 33, 21. So you can see it's in the 20s, it's in the 30s, it's in the, in some weeks it was in the 50s. So that one is harder to predict. Now, if I compare that with what I have in clothing, 27, we had a big week last week because we sold something $200. So that made our average go up to 40. But before that, then 34, 29, 30, 26, 29, 28. I mean, you're talking my variability in price is smaller, so it's easier for me to predict that side of the house.
And those are numbers that you're shooting off. Are those the average prices?
That was the average selling price for everything that sold in that
Got
1
it.
week.
So then my other question is, and this is the reason why I always get kind of confused when you would share these numbers. We go out and we're buying things based on just what's available.
Right.
You kind of go out into the world and what do people have? Like I'm not going out with a shopping, a list saying I want to buy these things. I'm like, what do you got? And I'll see if I want to buy it. And then the other thing is my gut. Do I think this is cool? Do I think that's, I guess, an artist in me? And number three, can I get it cheap? So those numbers for you though, how are they informing your decisions on what to buy?
Well, they don't really inform my decisions as to what to buy, although we can get into that later. If I see trends changing, I can say, okay, I'm going to change what I buy because certain things aren't selling anymore. And you've done that just organically yourself too. What to buy. What it does do though is when I can start seeing a predictable pattern based on it. Of course, now it's 4 or 5 years. When I see good patterns of, okay, this is how many things that we're buying generally each month, I get a pretty good idea overall of what our average purchase price is each month. So if I take all of our purchases divided by the number that we purchased, we're going to get an average, right? So I can predict, okay, if I'm going to list, say, 300 items in the next month to be up for sale, that means in that future month, I'm also going to have to buy 300 items. If my average purchase price overall is about $5, I can do the math and I know how much cash I'm going to need the next month. So that's the reason that I like to use it, because I said before when we were bringing on our photographer, I knew I was going to have to ramp up more things to purchase to keep him busy, as well as I was going to have an extra cash outlay because I'm paying for his labor today, but that item is not going to sell until a month or 2 months down the road. So I was able to use this to say, I got a cash flow hole coming up. How big's that going to be? And do I have enough cash to weather that storm until that increased level of activity is now paying off with increased sales? So it doesn't really change what I buy, like necessarily what I buy. That's a different analysis, but it does tell me a pretty good indication of what the next month, 3 months, or even year, which is what I have in front of me now. I got like our prediction for the year. How are things going to shake out from a cash flow perspective? So I get a pretty good idea of what our total revenue is going to be for the year and what our total net profit is going to be for the year.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I guess I guess it's kind of to make, I don't know, tell me if I'm wrong. Does it make you just feel better just as a businessman? It just helps you kind of get on stable ground.
Yeah, it's not really just because it makes it feel better. It's just my ability to look and say, okay, I got a pretty good idea of what's coming. You know what I'm saying? And especially, like I said, when things change as they have in the last 4 months, I go, okay, I think I may need to make some adjustments in the business because what used to be a normal sell through rate is now no longer a normal sell through rate. And when it's as dramatic as it's been, it's like, okay, we got to start making some adjustments because what used to work in the past is not working in the future.
I see. So these numbers are like assumptions, and you're testing your assumptions, and then when those assumptions turn out wrong somewhere down the line, then it triggers you to be like, let me revisit those assumptions and see.
Exactly.
Okay, I
Exactly.
got you. Okay,
Yeah.
that's smart.
So it's like, hey, if Humbles used to sell, right? I don't touch them anymore. We used to be able to sell, bicycle helmets. Colorado, a lot of bicycle helmets. You know what? Can't sell them for a good profit anymore. So you can see that organically, but this also kind of says, okay, even, when you start getting into the bigger size of a business, I'm kind of looking at it from the 10,000 foot view, not just item by item or even type. I can say, okay, as a business, what used to be selling at, the mid teens in a sell through rate, it starts dropping down consistently into single digits. Okay, we got to make an adjustment.
Okay, so one way I wanted to kind of approach this conversation is for anyone hearing this is like we're both like long term. We've sold on eBay for long term. We aren't
Right, right,
new.
right.
So we've been selling it for 12 years, 10 of those depending full time income on it. And you
Right.
guys have been doing it for how long? You and your wife?
Yeah, she started back in 2004, and then we
Wow.
went full time in 2015.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So, and the reason why that's interesting is that I don't see a lot of conversation online from people that have been selling for a really long time. I see the people pop up. There's a lot of excitement. I mean, they're just
I
like, they're obsessed, It's like they found something, the just this pot of gold, and they get so excited. But then I always see they kind of fizzle out, or they just
right.
stop sharing and maybe they go
Yeah,
somewhere else.
once
Yeah.
once the pixie dust wears off, I mean, and it's great because you're able to see, hey, I can go out. I mean, there's something to be said for finding in yourself the ability to go out, kill it, bring it home. And that's what you're doing. You went out, you found it, you brought it, you cleaned it up, you sold it, you made some money. I I still honestly think that's something that really should be taught to especially the younger generation, just to make sure they're doing. I think they do have that, but that successful feeling. I mean, I'm a business guy. Was trained as a CPA, was making six figures, and yet the thrill that I had selling a shirt for $20 that I know I paid $2 for was thrilling. It was more than my paycheck. You know what I'm saying? There was something to be said for that that independence of going out and killing it and bringing it home and knowing that you can provide for yourself. There's a lot to be said for that. Now, at the same time, we all know this can be a grind too. So that pixie dust wears off, and at some point, it starts being like a business. And I think you have to constantly do things to make it interesting. But at the end of the day, after you come home and you're all happy with all the things you bought, you gotta knuckle down. You gotta get it cleaned. You gotta get it listed. You gotta get it photoed. I mean, that still can be a grind for a lot of folks. At some point, they can say, "Yeah, this is going to be. I guess what I wonder what I'm going to do today. I bet I'm going to photo a bunch of shoes and get them online." So,
And that's kind of what I think the rest of our conversation is going to kind of be around, is how us as guys selling and our partners, because we're a team together,
right.
sell online, how we keep doing it and how we have to always be making different decisions so the business can keep going and make money, but also so we're not burning out. I mean, it's kind of a balance between those things because we're not robots, we're human beings here, and we have to live a life with some level of, happiness.
Right. And I think you have to, I mean, just like anything else, I'm starting to get, I'm starting to see the number 50 in my age coming up here soon. So I know that, and Veronica and we've talked before. I mean, retirement's a nice concept, but it's just not probably what we're going to do. I don't really see that I'm planning to completely retire. And I want to be able to do something to be productive when I'm 70, when I'm 80, when I'm 90, and I really don't feel like being 90 years old, going to Goodwill, sorting shoes and clothes, and getting them photoed and listed and put online. Now, will we always do that? Yeah, we will, because I think there's a lot to be said for seeing what is of value at, estate sales, yard sales, thrift stores, whatever, and putting it online and making yourself productive that way. But when you're starting to push, you know, start seeing that you're in the fall of your life, not necessarily the spring and summer, is that really what you want to be doing when you're getting older? So similar to you, where you've transitioned a lot of your income and you've been able to buy some, rental properties and some other business ventures that you could do when you're older, and it's not the grind of photoing and listing. There's a lot to be said for that, and that's kind of where we're at. We're planning now phase two of kind of where we're going to go in our adventure. So eBay is going to start being backed off a little. It's not going away, but we're starting that phase two. And so we're going to back off eBay and start pushing more into the real estate side.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said for us, I mean, eBay was always a means to an end, and I
Right.
always encourage people to, I see eBay as like a cash generator, like let it generate cash, and then be smart. Where do you want to put that cash, and try and put it somewhere
Exactly
else?
right.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get back to just our kind of our personal lives, and you can share as much or as not as much as you want. So
Right.
it's been a year and a half since we last talked, and I know a lot has happened personally. And I think this is
Right.
important for people to hear because, again, we're all human beings, and family stuff happens, and work stuff happens, and life changes, and that's why eBay will change with you. So, what's been going on the past 18 months, and where are you guys now?
Yeah. So we were trucking along pretty well, and then life took kind of the hard right turn when my father fell really ill in June, and then passed away. And during June, when we went up there, we packed up the family and drove all night up to Missoula, Montana, and stayed up there. And then after he passed, Veronica and the boys left, and I stayed up there with my mom for a month, just kind of helping her get some stuff done around the farm and some other things. It was good because I'm up there in the middle of farm country south of Missoula. Got a lot of time to myself, and was able to kind of think and see and do a lot of reflecting and say, okay, we've talked a lot about doing phase two and getting ready for the next step. So we started making the hard push in on that. And so now we're going to, we started going down the road of we want to start getting into real estate. We know we have a lot of equity in our home, and we want to use that equity to work for us. So the plan is to use a home equity line of credit to purchase some real estate property and then have that income. It's got to be, again, it's going to have to be the right numbers, just like anything else. Once those numbers are coming in right, I can buy this, place at X. I know what all my monthly costs are going to be, including paying back on that loan, and it's still generating cash. We're going to use the home equity line of credit to do that. After it shows about a year or so worth of consistent profits, we'll turn around, we'll get a business loan for just that property, get that cash out. We can pay back the HELOC and then go do it again and just kind of keep recycling that. What we found was the problem with the eBay business is it's not real easy to get good financing when you have that lower income, and we still have our mortgage that we have on our house. So, we're obviously in a higher area here in Denver. So what we found out was our 15-year mortgage, even though we're paying the mortgage every month, the proportion of our mortgage payment to what our income was on eBay was too high to really get any good financing.
Right. Real quick, because I think this is important. I guess this is kind of going off topic on eBay, but it's really important for anyone who's kind of running their own business because we've had the same issue too. Because with eBay, you can be generating a lot of money, but for taxes, you want to claim as many expenses as you can. So
Correct.
technically, you're really not making a lot of money if you're doing it right because
Exactly.
everything's expenses. And that's great because then you're not paying a lot of taxes. But then when the bank looks at it, they're like, but you don't make a lot of money. And then you try and
Right.
explain it and they're like, well, we don't care. That's what you say. So
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to real quick to side trip that. So what we found our quote required mortgage payment was too high compared to what our stated income was on our taxes. So we started going down the road of even refinancing our 15-year mortgage, and we were having trouble. I'm like, wait, you're not going to give me a new 15-year mortgage? It's going to cut my payment in half. I'm already making the payment that it is now. What makes you think I'm not going to be able to make half that payment? And so that's where we kind of, went off and said, okay, that was the reason I went back to work, started getting the high income. It helped me refinance. So now our mortgage payment's cut in half and my income has tripled. And so now it's a lot easier for us to get financing.
We're quick. So, because in case people miss that, so you and your wife sell on eBay, and then you decided to go back and get a full-time job, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And how long has that been now?
That's been since October.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, what is it like having quit your full-time job, run this business with you and your wife and your kids at home for since 2015, I think? She's 16.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
now going back to the job and having a boss. Can you talk about that?
Well, and so the nice thing is, primarily, I don't really have a boss. So and you can choose your entrance point. So essentially, I'm a contractor. So I'm basically what's called a fractional controller. So the point would be normally I would have 3 to 5 different clients where I'm doing the books and I'm doing the controller work for each of them. So they can't necessarily afford one full time, but they can afford one part time. So I would have multiple clients and I can work either at the client site or I can work at my house. So there still has that entrepreneurial ability where you can control some of that. And if the client's being unreasonable at some point, it's easier, you can kind of walk out. I'm still with my main company. And then we can say, look, this isn't a fit. We get somebody else in there, and then I can go on to a different client. Now that's not been the case that I've had, because where I had the place that I went into really was in some bad shape, and so I'm still working there. And we just talked. I'm going to definitely be there full time for the next couple of months. But it's also nice. I'm paid hourly, so if I'm working on a weekend like I did yesterday, put in another 8 hours, I'm getting paid for all of those hours. So instead of being salary and every extra hour you work drives down your hourly rate, I'm keeping the hourly rate, and when I put in more hours, I get paid more money.
Are you a W-2 employee or 1099?
So I'm actually a W-2 with the company that I'm with.
Okay, gotcha. Cool. Yeah, and so I think this is important for anyone that sells on eBay for the long term. I mean, we've talked about this too. We also we're contractors, although we're normally 1099. We will take jobs as they come, because if you've been working in a career for a while, you should probably have a bit of a reputation, and that's what happens to us. People who know us from the old days, they'll send us an email, are you interested? And the great thing is, having an eBay business, we don't have a level of desperation. We can negotiate, we can kind of talk about it, and it's worked out well for us.
Right, exactly. And that is the nice thing, because you have that fallback position. That's the nice thing going back. Then yeah, and sometimes it gets to be a bit of a grind, but I know in the back of my mind, I always have the eBay business if I ever really need to. And it's even to the point where Veronica, she wanted to start expanding. So she actually has taken a 1099 position working in a real estate office, which is obviously going to be good for contacts and things like that. But it also gives her another stream of income that she can work, and she's working from home. So, okay, she can fill in some hours. She can do that. So she's got eBay and the real estate business, and then I have eBay and my full-time position as a controller.
Right. And just again, in case someone doesn't know, 1099 just means if you're a 1099 employee, they basically send you money, and then you're in charge of paying all of your own taxes and Social Security and all that. And it's normally very temporary. And if you're W-2, it means you're an actual employee where you get a paycheck and they take out and they contribute to your Social Security and Medicare. It's more like a typical job.
Right, right. And there's some advantages of being a 1099. So like when I'm going to my current client, I cannot charge my mileage as an expense because I'm a W-2. However, Veronica can. So if she has to go there. She can charge her mileage because that's an expense to her as an independent business, essentially.
Yeah. And I mean, and trust me, we go back and forth sometimes. We're like, oh my God, wouldn't it just be nice just to have like a job again and just like paycheck every 2 weeks? And it's just like, whatever.
There is a lot to be said for that. Granted, it's a lot easier for me too, because I jumped in and I'm immediately making 2 to 3 times what I was when we were working on eBay. So that part's nice. But yeah, when you're getting paid twice a month, doesn't matter. So when you have those long days of no cha-chings or very little cha-chings, it's nice to know that, what, I still got money coming in from a different stream. And there's, again, there's a lot to be said for having multiple streams of income.
And the good thing is, just to kind of wrap up this part of it, I mean, the good thing is that if you're coming from a point of having an eBay business, again, you can kind of negotiate your working terms. So the
Yes.
job that you do agree to is not a grind, is not a horrible experience, which is why we wanted an eBay job in the business. And so we've been able to do that as well, where we're working from home for the most part, where, the way we communicate, it's with our boss, is full of it's respect and appreciation. I mean, everything, you get to kind of craft your own job, which is really the dream.
Absolutely. That's where a lot of the power comes in. And I think we've touched on this before. Making sure that you're not crazy in debt, making sure that you're keeping your burn rate down, making sure that you've got 6 months at least of income sitting in a bank somewhere, making sure that you're saving and buying investments instead of paying for liabilities. When you have that, it's the same type of, it's just like having the FU money when you're at a normal job and you aren't doing eBay. Suddenly, when things are bad at work, you don't mind as much because you've got a lot of other things covered and you're not beholden to that one job. It gives you freedom. When you have another business on the side that you can ramp up and live off of, like we have for the last 5 years, again, yeah, I'm in job A, but I know I got job B. So it makes your stress levels down. You can roll with the punches a lot easier, and you're not constantly feeling like you're a slave to a wage.
So yeah, I mean, so I think for anyone that's been selling on eBay and maybe is getting long in the tooth, I mean, these are all options, and that's the kind of good thing. It's not all or a nothing. It's eBay. It can be working for other people. It can also be buying real estate or in some other business that you may have, and it's just kind of it's eBay and that's the way I always see it.
Exactly. There's not one way we all have to do it. It's hike your own hike. If you want to do it full time, great. If you want to do it part time, great. Just whatever meshes with the life and the goals and the things that you have set, as long as you're moving forward towards that, you're doing the right thing.
Now let's go back to eBay. So you got a job and you're making more money, which is good, and you're going to kind of shoot it into a stream at doing real estate, which is good, but you're still doing eBay. So when we were talking like 18 months ago, you were pretty bullish on eBay and your sales were growing, and you kind of assumed they would keep growing.
Yep.
So what?
The assumption.
Yeah, right. So let's talk about this because I have a lot of thoughts too. So go for it. Well, how has eBay been for you in the past year?
Going and continuing on up into May
of 2019, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. May of 2019. I mean, we were still dead on track. We were right where we wanted to be. We had a burp in June, and that was by using 6-bit, we had actually enabled a feature that they had. I didn't understand the feature completely. So what it does is, now that everything's good till cancel, because remember that whole argument we used to have, I was always the 30-day listing. And so they had a feature on 6-bit, and they still do, where you can say, okay, now that things are good till canceled, you can tell 6-bit, I want you to take this listing and I want you to end it after whatever number of days. You could do it 30 days, 60 days, 100 days, 5 days. I mean, however often you want to pull that listing down and relist it. So I looked at that and said, okay, well, eBay has said that things go stale after 60 days. Let's enable this feature and say, for all these items, let's change it to 60 days. Well, what I didn't realize is it was going to do that retroactively. So suddenly, after I enabled that, the very next day I look and we have hardly anything online. I mean, we went from having 3,000 listings to having like 800. And so, and I was actually in Montana when, talking with Veronica because I could remote in, and I told her, oh, I figured out what happened. The stuff is going to go on, but it's going to take it a few days and everything's going to relist. We suddenly had a huge drop off in June. Now, granted, it's June, it's summer. But we went from having let's see, in May, our top line was 14,000. In June, it dropped to 10.
In gross
Like,
profits.
yeah, just on the sales line.
Sales line. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So, yeah, we went from 14,000 in sales in May to 10,000 in sales in June. I said, that's a significant drop, even for the summer. In fact, we went up in July to 11 and up in August to 12. And I'm like, okay, by resetting the store, so let's put some potential fuel on the fire to the conspiracy theories of stuff being out there. Okay, we pretty much reset the store. Our sell-through rate and everything just plummeted, but then it was coming back. It was actually doing not too bad. And I'm like, okay, that reset kind of hurt us. But going into August and September, we're not doing too bad. But then in October, we flatlined, and normally we go up in October. And this is also around the time that, okay, a lot of our stuff is now hitting 90 days. We know there was the kerfuffle with all of the item specifics, which we're still working through, where especially with clothing, a lot of the item specifics got all screwed up. The sizes aren't in there, that kind of stuff. They just completely have revamped it. And we, for the first time in October, instead of our sales growing year over year, we actually retracted 15%. So, yeah, normally, so in October of 2017, I'm sorry, October of 2018, we had a $16,000 sales month. And then we dropped to 13,000 in October. We were down again in November. We were down 12%. We were down again in December, 15%. And in January, we're down 28% year over year. So obviously we have more inventory. We had 2,000 items in inventory in January of 19. We have 3,000 in January of 20. Yet our sales are down $3,000, which is 30%. And yeah, we're down, 28% year over year. Obviously something has changed.
Yeah, I want to say this makes me feel really good. only because we've had the exact same experience, and it really started, like last May of 2019. We expected a slowdown for the summer, but it got really slow. And then as fall came, I just assumed, okay, it's going to come back. It's holiday season, and basically our sales were just flat. And actually, December and then January were even worse.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and for us, I mean, I keep reasoning, well, one thing is we've been really busy doing other things and really relying on our large inventory to carry us. So we've been only listing maybe 200 items a month, which is not a lot for us, just kind of keeping it going. Right. So I was just blaming it on that. But, I hear from you and other people that there seems to be some kind of fundamental change with eBay itself.
Right. And I don't know what it is. I have some things, and me, I try to take, okay, what can I do about it? Instead of just, complaining, eBay's screwing me, what am I going to do? So, we're going to make a concerted effort. I know that clothing is one of the biggest items that has dropped significantly. So, for example, again, me, Mr. Numbers guy. So through 2019, our sell-through rate on clothing, we averaged about 12 to 15%.
And that means
so we're selling 15% of our clothing inventory every month. Okay. So suddenly, though, we started seeing a drop down to 11 in October. We've been in nothing but single digits on clothing all year in 2020. And I mean, we're talking, we went from an average of 15% to now we're an average of 7%. Our sell-through rate is in half. When you look at the number of items we were selling, of just clothing, we were averaging 60 items a week, just clothing. Okay. Now in 2020, so far, we're only at 32. And it's been in the 30s ever since, basically Q4. And I know, it can be a slower time, but we haven't seen that much of a drop off in just the clothing before. If you look at 18, we were trucking and we dropped down into we were talking the low teens, average of 11, but now we're talking an average of 7. So we've gone down a couple, 3 percentage points, but we've never gone down to half of our normal sell-through rate.
So when we were previously talking about how you do numbers and your numbers are a set of assumptions and it helps you when they don't match your assumptions, then it helps you figure out, okay, I need to question those assumptions. What does your gut tell you about what's going on?
You know what? I'm not sure. Honestly, I think part of what has gone on is I believe that the good till canceled, I think affects clothing. I think it makes, because there's so much competition in the clothing market, and it could be that other sellers are doing better than I am because I've left it as good till canceled. After we did that one experiment with 6-bit and that kind of killed the store, I've been hesitant to make a change. But I think we need to be doing more ending listings and giving them a fresh look, as well as on top of that, I think the clothing item specifics have fallen. When I looked at, again, I also tracked our traffic. Our traffic is down significantly. We used to get above, we were always trending in 18 and most of 19 between 40 and 45,000 impressions per day. Now we're in the 30s. So that tells me that people aren't even getting our items in front of them. Now, that could be one of two things. What we have for sale, people aren't searching for, or they're searching for our items, but we're not getting shown to buyers because maybe we still have bad item specifics, maybe we have bad pricing, that type of thing. Now, I've noticed specifically that like shirts are pretty much, the pricing has really fallen on those, and that's something that we're transitioning out of. We're going to probably, again, so what can I do to take the reins on that? Okay, if they're not selling and we're seeing, I can prove that, shirts aren't selling well, I got to blow them out. I got to get rid of them. It's time to just burn that item, burn that bridge, get that inventory out, and start pushing it on other items.
Yeah, I think that's for people who sell on eBay for a long time. That one trap is you find a category of item and it sells really well. You're finding them everywhere for cheap. You put them up and they sell well, and you kind of get used to that. And then when the market for that item drops out, it can really frazzle people, and
right.
make people
Right.
upset. And the answer is to do what you're talking about. Just stop depending on that kind of item and find
Right.
something else,
Right. And so I'm not 100% sure. Okay, is it because we're having bad things? I think that's a piece of the puzzle. Okay, so let's get out of that market. But I also think because of some of the issues that eBay has had in the past year, item specifics and things of that nature, I think it's not putting things out front. Now, the bigger fear is there a softening in the market for people going to eBay to do their shopping? So that's another one. Like, it's very hard to sell many shirts that I found anyway for any good profit on Poshmark, just because Poshmark has that fixed rate. I kind of wish they would say give a fixed rate for first class items, but they just do everything's priority, $6.79. Well, the buyer's already automatically going to have to pay that, so it's kind of hard to get much profit out of shirts. But I've seen Poshmark soften a little bit. But it's still been a nice piece of the business. So I think, eBay used to be 90% of our sales. And in the past, since October, it's dropped to be 83% of our sales. So it's taking we're selling less of our items on eBay. It's still the biggest one we have, but the other sites, Etsy and Poshmark, are taking a bigger share of what our sales are. So there could be something there with eBay, and it could be something even just clothing online.
Right. Yeah, I know. I mean, there it is interesting. We're all now talking about more of like the existential threat to what we're all
Right.
doing. Is it just people are leaving eBay and going to these other apps, or is it people are just not buying as much stuff online? I mean, or I that can't be true. But the kind of stuff we're selling, I don't know.
Correct.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
it could be, I've actually seen, you heard Amazon came out with their own kind of brand of clothing, and you basically, you could buy everything you wanted. They'd ship it to you. You put on what see if it fits. Whatever you don't want, you ship it back, and it's free both ways. I actually started seeing those clothing brands actually show up in the thrift stores recently. So, you know, is there a way that people are starting, especially in the clothing side, that they're shopping differently? So maybe being heavy clothing is not a good idea. So for us, we're going to push. We're actually going to be more the Jay and Ryan model. We're going to start pushing more into hard goods.
no,
That's
get out of
that's
my area. Come on.
but the one thing with that is I also know the sell through rate on hard goods is going to be, middle single digits. So when we do that, we've got to be strategic about it. We've got to make sure it's for higher value, but it's going to be slower. That means I'm going to put out the capital now, and instead of getting paid back normally in 3 or 4 months, I may get paid back in 9 to 12 months. So again, I'm going to have to use that forecasting tool and say, how much is that going to affect the business? Because we're moving into things that sell slower. We're going to be spending more money and not getting money today or tomorrow, but a few months from now.
Yeah,
So,
I
but the sell-through rate on hard goods, the sell-through rate on hard goods has actually remained basically the same for us for the past 3 years. It's still been in that call it 5 to 9% average. You know what I'm saying? So it hasn't flatlined, but our inventory of it's gone down. So, okay, I think we're seeing that that's the low end. If we strategically build that up, we'll start seeing that cash come back.
see. I think, and that's the interesting thing. I mean, we still sell clothes. We still have
Right.
a good number of clothes in our inventory, but we do not buy them or sell them like we used to, and we start growing out all of our other inventory. And when you say hard goods, that's also like vintage item,
Yep.
antiques, weird. I call it the weird stuff. It's just like all
Yep.
the stuff in a box somewhere that like oftentimes people overlook, or it's like long tail items. And I think
Right.
those kind of items are so difficult to predict because they're also different. It's all one of a kind stuff.
Right. And it is getting tougher. I mean, honestly, one of the other reasons that we're gonna really back off on some of the clothing stuff, it's getting a lot harder to source and find, because there was a glut of people actually going in and doing it. But I also think that especially, some of the Goodwills and thrift stores in our area, they're pulling and they're selling online. In fact, I was actually on Amazon this week. I was buying some business books, and I look, and of course, yeah, you're showing me the first item, but I'm going to go into, see who else is selling it on Amazon. Go to that buy box, sort it by low, and see who's selling it. And if it's a book and it's in acceptable condition, I'm fine. I'm probably going to tear it up a little bit anyway. Guess who were selling the books to me? Goodwill through Amazon. So I know Goodwill has their online stuff, and they're pulling some things because there's a few stores, a couple of honey holes that I have where I used to always consistently, consistent enough where I would find a couple of high end brands. I haven't been seeing those in months. Now, it could be there's another scavenger out there picking it clean, and good for them. At least it's there and they're getting it. Okay, so now I got to react. Maybe I need to shop on a different day and differently. Uh, but if it is Goodwills that we know they're pulling that stuff, okay, now my sourcing is starting to dry up on that area. So I've got to adjust and source from a different place. And the biggest weakness that all of us have in this business model is where we can source our inventory. If we're reliant on a thrift store, we're at the behest of somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we said, if you have been selling for a long time, the one trap is you sell a certain kind of item, and then when the market drops out, you're like scared to death. The other thing is
Right.
if you depend on just shopping at a couple of different places and you go there and you're always getting awesome stuff, and then suddenly you're not, that's also a very dangerous trap as well. And so,
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. There's one route that I mean, there's one route that we have that we do once a month, and I kind of have a route that I go through when I go through clothing because I generally know what some of the hotter items are that other people would pick through, and if I see other pickers in there, I'm going to hit those hot items first because I know the areas that they don't like to search and sort and list, so I can save those till later. Then I started seeing a guy regularly, and he's picking in my honey hole, and he's picking the stuff that I know of. So now I got to watch how to, got to have my head on a swivel. So I got to look for the small stuff from these. This guy's now picking my stuff. So again, it's always a risk. Sourcing is your biggest issue.
I will say, I mean, I don't know, is this like a fundamental change and this is the new norm of how it's going to be? Part of me feels though is that, we try and just be kind of like quiet, head down, humble, and maybe there's a lot more scavengers right now. But if it's hard for us, it's hard for other people, and we're going to
Right.
weather it out. And the weaker ones, the people that don't have the staying power, will drop off, and maybe we'll go back to the way it was. I don't know.
Exactly, exactly. It's kind of like, it's just like a lot of investing. I mean, think about Bitcoin. No, nobody knew what it was when it was 3,000. And then the shoe shine guy and the lady at the checkout counter and your nephew who's 6 years old is all invested in Bitcoin and they're all going to get rich. Then the bottom falls out, reality sets in. But have you noticed what Bitcoin's done lately? It's been on a nice little run for the last few months again. So a lot of the hype has gone out. If you weather that storm smartly, it comes back based on something else and you'll be okay. Same as any other business. And I don't know, we kind of got burnt out. You guys are the one that we stick with. We got burnt out watching, the tons and tons and tons of different YouTube videos on reselling and this, that, and the other thing. I don't know if they're talking about this and there, but I think at some point that's going to start losing its panache because at the end of the day, it's a lot of work. And unless you're securing different types of sourcing, that's kind of our next thing is when we keep doing this, I'd rather start working into more wholesale, more direct deals with companies where I can say, hey, I want to be a wholesaler of your item online. Can I get an exclusive contract to do that on eBay? I list your items, and when they sell, I can source from you.
Yeah, I mean, we've never gone that route, but I absolutely approve of that way of thinking that once you have an eBay store and you're selling stuff you find at Goodwill, you've just created like a process. And then
Right.
you just have to be creative. And maybe instead of going to Goodwill, yeah, you sell wholesale or you go to auctions or flea markets or you put an ad in the paper saying you'll buy out a whole estate of some lady that just died. I mean, just
Right.
be
Right.
creative. eBay is just a platform, and that's where it gets exciting.
Exactly. And again, we've talked before. There's a million ways to do this, and by getting started doing something, at least do something one way, stick with it. Then you'll learn different ways, different tweaks, different ways of doing it, and they can all work as long as the numbers are right. And there's no set way of doing it. So, yeah, once you get a process established, you just keep slowly improving it, and it can take you in a completely different direction.
Right. And I do want to remind people, I mean, when we're talking about, eBay has really gone down for us as well this past 6 months. But that doesn't mean we're not making money though. So I think that's the
Right.
difference. And the key for us is that, we've always tried to keep our expenses as low as possible. So I
Amen.
know the minimum I need to make on eBay to cover my expenses, and we've done that up until now. So we're still okay. But
Right. Right. Right.
you got to be careful of your expenses, and I think that's another trap for people that have been on eBay or Amazon for a while. When life is good and you're making a lot of money, don't let your expenses match that income, because if that income goes down, then your expenses are still way up there.
Exactly. Smartest thing you can do is learn to be frugal and buy assets. And when you get a raise at work, you take all of that raise, maybe give yourself, 20% of the raise, take the other 80% of that increase and sock it away and keep your expenses down. I mean, that's how a lot of the fire folks do it, right? I mean, they set a path and they'll give themselves some increases. When you earn more money by doing X, Y, and Z, yeah, you should get yourself some of that reward, but don't fall into the trap of then changing your lifestyle to match your income. If you're buying assets first, buying assets first, buying assets first, if you can do that, I mean, the only reason we were able to do what we've done for the past 5 years is because we were doing that. Automatic, money going into 401ks and Roths and all those things that we had available, and now we're still continuing to do that. Kind of like you, we talk about burn rate. I have about I have about 19 different bank accounts because I budget for each item, and I say, okay, every week I'm putting money into a grocery checking account. I'm putting money into a dining and entertainment checking account. I'm putting money into a mortgage account. I'm putting money into a gold investment account. I'm putting money into a Roth investment account. I do that religiously, and it's automatic. It comes out of our checking every week. So we just have to make sure we fill the bucket. And when we do those budgets, one of the things we're trying to look at first is how much money are we saving and putting away and buying an asset instead of just using it to live our lives. Because buying those assets and setting it aside and letting time work for you and generate that income, then when you're 40 and 50 and 60 and 70 and 80, that money's going to keep perpetually growing, and it can provide for your future.
Yeah, and if someone hasn't ever heard that term, you said the FIRE community, FIRE, that's financially independent, retire early. And so if you've ever heard that, Google it. That's just like a whole rabbit hole of a million different small communities of people who are, instead of spending being the norm, not spending is the norm. So every thing you buy, you talk about with your partner, or you really try and think about it. Do we really need it? And it's amazing. Even if you don't have a huge salary, you can save up quite a bit. I know me and as Ryan, this is a while ago, 2004, when we both had jobs, we were both saving in about $500 each a month, just putting it away out of our paycheck. And we saved up enough to buy a house, so small, but it took a while, but small amounts do add up.
Right. And the most important thing is actually getting that muscle in your spirit strong of, I'm going to put money away and I'm always saving. We're doing that now because it'll change your family tree if you end up owning your house outright, so that when you pass on, your kids inherit a house debt free. That's huge. Instead of inheriting a mortgage, they're inheriting a house debt free. What if you can then take that and it can be a real estate portfolio that you've already got a manager that can run for them? You guys would have that ability. That's one of the things that we're looking at. And even today, we've started putting money into, while our kids are still young, we've been making sure we fund their Roth IRAs while they're now, roughly 20 years old. So they're going to have 50 years of money that we're putting aside for them that's already set aside for their retirement. And it's going to grow for 50 years tax free. So if I can do that and show them I'm doing this for you, guess what you get to do when you have kids? You do the same thing. You're not only saving for your retirement, but you're saving for your kids' retirement. You start practicing the muscle of buying assets, just like we do on eBay. When we're out shopping, we're buying an asset, something that's going to bring me money down the road, instead of just using it to buy expenses and liabilities that are taking money out of your pocket each week.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a whole frugal world too, and it is a muscle of being frugal. And the cool thing is, instead of eating out every day where it just becomes a normal thing, or buying it yourself presents every day where it becomes a normal thing and not a big deal, when you're frugal, when you go out, it feels like a luxury. Or when you buy a new phone, it feels like a really big deal. And it actually feels, the money we spend feels better because it's not as common, you know?
Exactly, exactly. And so, there's something to be said when Lazarus Long said, budget the luxuries first. If you're budgeting to where you hate your life, you're not going to like that either. So find out what makes you happy. Then when you do it, luxuriate in it. You've budgeted for it. You've talked about it before. You can have anything. You just can't have everything. So choose the one or two things that make you happy and go in on those.
Okay, a couple more things just to catch up because I've not talked to you in a while. You, when we last talked, were really starting to think about branching out from eBay and selling on other platforms, and you mentioned it, and I think it was Etsy, Poshmark, and I don't know if anything else. So, tell me about how much work it takes to list on other platforms other than eBay, and what your success rate has been.
The actual work is actually not too bad. For example, especially because we have 6-bit, that makes it so much nicer.
And real quick, 6-bit is like a third-party
Yeah,
subscription-based, like a listing app, right?
yeah, it lists, but more importantly, it holds all of your inventory. So if eBay blew up tomorrow and lost all of our listings, we'd be back in a day.
Right, and we have something called InkFrog, so there's a different platforms that are like this.
Right, right. And so because of that, the way since it's basically a database that holds all of your listing information, what we can do is we've got a dual monitor setup both in up here as well as for Veronica. So we can come here and say, okay, in one screen I can have 6-bit up, in the other screen I can have Poshmark up, and I can say, oh, okay, this item in 6-bit is not listed on Poshmark. In about 1 minute, I've copied and pasted everything, and it's up and listed on Poshmark.
And real quick, I will say, because some people are really hungry, like they're like, why can't there just be something that does it automatically? I know people are trying to come up with little services, but I've never seen something that does it automatically where I list it once and like shoot it out. Because every platform has different
Right.
boxes and different requirements. So
Yeah.
you're just talking about like copying and pasting into the right boxes. So it makes it
Yeah.
faster.
So what 6-bit will do, 6-bit will actually list on Etsy for you. Now it's a separate process. So basically, you're going to have a tab for your eBay listing and then a tab for your Etsy listing, and we ran on that platform for quite a while. And so all you have to do is you create your Etsy listing in 6-bit or your eBay listing in 6-bit. You go to the Etsy tab, it pulls over a lot of the data, and then you just have to fill out the data that's Etsy specific. They use tags and that type of thing, and their categories are different, and their pricing you may want to change. So you can list on 6-bit on both eBay and on Etsy. And the nice thing is if something sells on one platform, it'll pull it off of the other. If you've paid up, it's like $30 a month extra to have two platforms. So the nice part is on the back end, if something sells, it manages that inventory for you.
So you're still having to manually list on each platform with some help. But the cool thing is that your listing software 6-bit then syncs it though, which is cool.
Exactly, exactly. So if something sells on one platform, it pulls it off of the other. And it saves you the time. Now, Poshmark, there's nothing that will cross post onto Poshmark because Poshmark doesn't have, I think it's called an API. They don't have the right kind of database setup.
And they're just a mobile app, right?
Exactly. You can do it on the desktop, but they don't have the database setup that's required to do that. So we just copy and paste, and we've talked about it before. What we do is anytime we cross post something on another platform, in the custom label SKU field, we just put -PM if we put it on Poshmark or -ET if we put it on Etsy. So every day we'll look at in the morning our eBay sales and say, okay, did anything sell in the last 24 hours that has a -PM or a -ET on it? And then we just go directly onto those platforms and we just pull the listing down. And if something sells on those platforms, we just enter, if something sells on Poshmark, we go into 6-bit, we enter the order information, and then it'll pull it down off of eBay and it records the sale for us.
Now, could you do all this without a third-party app like 6-bit?
You can, but what we ran into was it's a lot faster for me to find all of the pictures and information because it's in 6-bit. So when 6-bit is up and running, when you open up a listing, in 6-bit. So I can go to check listings, and I even have a specific view on there that says, tell me everything that's not on Poshmark. Because I said, give me every listing that doesn't have a -PM in it. When I drill into that listing, 6-bit will give it a unique number. So, for example, this item is item 1400. So all of the pictures for that item are in a specific folder that 6-bit references, and all of the pictures for that item are 1400-1-2-3-4. So when I want to create the listing on Poshmark, it says, where are the photos? I just already have it. Hey, Poshmark, go look in this folder and give me all the pictures that start with 1400. It finds the photos instantly. I link them up and I'm done. The rest is copying.
So I've always been kind of like the grumpy old man when it comes to a listing in other places, because I'm always like, I only have so much time. So if I start to spend time listing in other places, I take away from eBay, and then I'm spreading myself out too thin. And the dream, of course, is like I'm making $10,000 a month on eBay. So why can't I make $10,000 a month on Poshmark and on Etsy? And you're just like tripling your cash. But I'm thinking, you're spreading out your time. So then instead of making 10,000 on eBay, you're going to make 5,000 on eBay, right, and then 3,000 on Poshmark, and you're making the same amount of money. You're just spreading it out. And so it just becomes, where do you enjoy spending your time? That's my hypothesis. So I guess my question to you is, what have the numbers borne out for you as far as sales?
Yeah. So Poshmark has been great. I mean, for the longest time, again, it was bringing us an extra $400 to $500 a week in revenue. It's cooled off a little bit. It's more down into the teens, or let's see, not teens. So since Christmas, we'll say, it's been averaging still $300 a week. And now here's where I'll say, yes, you can only spend your time once, right? You can only work an hour on item A or item B. However, I can list a lot more things on Poshmark since it's already on eBay. I can list a heck of a lot more in that hour, and I'm putting my items in front of an audience that may not be on eBay. They might, but I do know there's a lot of people that only go to one platform or the other. So what you're doing is, like we've been running about 800 to 900 items on Poshmark every given week, and the sell-through rate, it's single digits. Again, it's clothing, but it's down into single digits. But again, Poshmark doesn't have the pull that eBay has. So even though the sell-through rate is lower, I'm still making $300 a week, and I'm probably spending maybe an hour or two cross-posting. Same thing with Etsy. Etsy, it's been still generating for us. Now, of course, Etsy hugely spikes in Q3 and then it comes crashing down. But Etsy during Q4, we've been averaging only 200 items out there, and we still averaged $100 a week, even through some of the slow weeks. And guess what? We're only spending maybe an hour cross-posting.
Right. So why do you only sell 200 items on Etsy when you have 3,000-ish on eBay?
Because again, we became very clothing and shoe centric, and because even of the hard goods that we have, and we still put some vintage clothing out there, but because it's also, not only is it generally better to be hard goods, but it also has to either be handmade or vintage. We don't have as many hard goods that are hand goods or vintage. That would be the perfect place for you. Like if you guys would ever just really ramp up your cross posting, yes, Ryan, I hear you saying it, but but that is the perfect place for you guys, because people like the unique and the weird come Q4 because they want it for a unique, that for Halloween or for Thanksgiving and family and Christmas for gifts, those things that are not the norm that people are buying out of the mall or out of Walmart. That's when they really ramp up, and then they kind of come settling back down for the rest of the year. And that was the reason why we got rid of the back end, is we just weren't doing enough in sales to justify $30 a month. When I'm only selling 2 to 4 items a week, I can just take those down manually myself.
On Etsy.
On Etsy.
Yeah.
On Etsy.
So just to give perspective, and I think you said this earlier. So you said right now you make about 83% of your sales on eBay, and then the other 17% is split between Poshmark and Etsy.
Yeah, as of right now, we are 83. As of last week, for the last 4 weeks anyway, we were 83% eBay, 15% Poshmark, and the rest was Etsy, 2%.
And on Poshmark, do you have your entire clothing store on Poshmark?
No, no, no. It's weird because what I do on Poshmark when we're cross posting, because it is a little bit of extra time, when I'm always looking, I sort 6-bit. When I sort our listings, I say, give me the listings of the highest dollar value items first. Well, I'm trying to get the high dollar items on Poshmark faster than the low dollar items. So we might have a better sell through rate if I was putting more low dollar items out there. But I'm trying to say, look, if I am investing, even if it only is a minute or two, I want to invest that minute or two to get faster sell through rate on something of higher value.
Right, like it's $50 or more or something instead of like a
Exactly.
$20
Let's
item.
get the higher suits and let's get the the higher shoes and the boots than we do on a $15 shirt.
Right. No, that's exciting. Okay, so then, kind of just to wrap this up. So from here on out, you guys are still selling on eBay. And what do you think you're going to do differently? You're going to be selling hard goods more,
Yeah,
or
I think we're going to focus. We're going to focus more on getting hard goods up. We'll still do some clothing, but I think we're going to be pickier, more selective. Unfortunately, that more selective means it's probably going to be longer tail as well. But I think we really want to. We kind of got away from hard goods probably too much, so we're going to steer the ship back more into the hard goods side. And that's fine. But we're also going to be real selective in the items that we do.
yeah, because if you want to get into hard goods, you got to get into storage. What are you going to do about that?
So we have 2 storage units now for our outside stuff. We'll most likely potentially end up getting a third.
And when you mean like a unit in the storage,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've got
yeah,
yeah,
facilities.
beautiful. It couldn't be any better. They put in a new public storage literally a half a mile from the post office, and it's climate controlled, and the two units we have are right next to each other, so it's kind of nice. So we go there pretty much every day, 6 days a week anyway. Get our stuff. We'll just end up having more items out there, because we are going to be changing and getting more eBay stuff out of the house, which isn't necessarily on the frugal side. But we're noticing we got a lot more family coming. We're kind of becoming the hub when it comes to the holiday time, and I kind of want to get that spare bedroom back to put some people in there. So
Yeah, I mean, I mean, just a side note on being frugal. Yeah, being frugal, you'll definitely find people that are just like, they're almost like they never spent any money at all. We are big advocates for getting your inventory out of your home, if you can. I know we lived in our home with a lot of our inventory for a long time, and once we built a building behind our house to put everything in there, it's really brought the quality of our life up.
yeah, it's stressful when you're constantly stepping over boxes and having issues, and it's bad enough when you're doing that with things that are already listed. Now, I could be an advocate for it. With death piles, you probably need to keep that someplace that it's going to bother you, because that means you got some work you need to do. So, but yeah, get it out of the house. It's a quality of life issue.
Yeah, I mean, I understand getting started. You got to be scrappy and you do what you can. But yeah, when you're been selling a long time, it's good to get that quality of life back. Cool. And then that job you have, that's semi permanent, or as long as you want it, is
Yeah,
that
I think it's going to be permanent at this point. Now, the client that I'm on, I know I'm going to be pretty much not only full time but over full time for the next couple of months. But then we've talked it's going to scale back, and then once it gets back, if it gets below 40 hours a week, I may go back and say, you know what, I've got some time. Why don't you go ahead and give me a second client, and I can just start filling that time? Because again, it's nice knowing we've got one stream that's consistent. It is making good money. And now that I'm stepping back into it, when now we're basically empty nesters, Veronica's got 2 things of her own that keeps her busy. I might as well make hay while the sun shines. And if I can make really good money at this, and it's a position and it's a job type that I can do almost location independent. And I've talked about that before, we're trying to get more items that you can do and your location is less required. So if this is stuff where I can be doing people's books online. My mom is basically an accountant for a guy who spends all his time overseas between Paris and Vietnam, and she works for him out of Montana. She keeps books and does all that kind of stuff. That's the kind of world we live in. So if I can do that in a place where I can live and have a house that's free and clear, that's going to happen down the road. I can. In fact, I worked, like I said, I worked all day yesterday. If the weather's really bad and I need to, I can work from home. I usually go into the client at least 4 days a week, but if I need to, I can sit and I can crank from home. I got my laptop right here, and I got a second monitor for it as well. So I can actually work all of the hours that I want. Most of the people in the company that I work with, they work out of their house and they just go to the clients for meetings and that type of thing.
I always try and think of like good jobs that would be complementary to selling on eBay. And, I always think of like having a food truck. I think
Right.
being an accountant or like doing taxes would be an awesome complementary job because yeah, you can do it from anywhere and it's kind of seasonal specific and
And it's somewhat on your own time. Our photographers, I mean, he has a couple of other gigs where he's going out and he's taking pictures at corporate functions, he's doing weddings, he's doing that type of thing. And so when he does our stuff, he has his whole setup in the part of his house that he's in. So we just give him stuff, he takes it to his place, he works on it whenever in the hell he wants to work on it, and we just meet him once a week. He drops off all of the clothes and the photos, and he takes a new batch and takes it to his place. So he's filling in that time with whatever work he wants to, and that's kind of something we're looking for, which is how many things can we do online. We've thought about doing some more copywriting and things of that nature, things that you can do where all you need is a laptop and an internet connection.
and while also providing a real value for people. I see a lot of that online of like, how can I work from home? And there's a lot of like multi-level marketing nonsense.
Right.
People,
Right.
please stay away from stuff like that. But,
Absolutely. I mean, for anything that you want in life, you have to just say, I want X and I'm going to give up Y for that. Because you don't get paid for time, you get paid for value. So if you want something, if you want a certain rate, you say, what is the value that I can bring? And then you bring that value with everything you've got. And that's one of the things that I have. I mean, I know I have the value with the knowledge and the skills that I have, where I can make a ton of money, and it's starting to be easier to be in that type of a position and work remotely and own your time to some extent. So I'm wanting to transition into that. And it's been nice. It's been interesting getting back into that, that everyday kind of a thing. But it's nice when I see that I am bringing value to folks. You know what I mean? And it's more than selling somebody a Brooks Brothers shirt. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's nice. That's not the only thing I am. I can go bring value by providing people their numbers and providing them with some skills to make sure they can improve their business.
right. I mean, it's like I said, we're humans, we're not robots. And that's why, it's good to talk about numbers, but yeah, you got to talk about the human side of it too, of what fulfills you and, just get you up in the morning.
Absolutely. Always remember, for as much, and this is coming from a numbers guy, but business is 95% people and 5% numbers. Got to know the numbers. They're very important. But your business relationship and how you're treating your customer and how you're treating your coworkers, that is 95% of your success.
Well, Troy, thank you so much for talking. I hope people that have been hearing this have really been enjoying hearing from people that have been selling on eBay for a long time. It is definitely a journey. It doesn't end. And it's all about choices. And, that's the important thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, the journey always continues, just what's around the next bend.
Okay, Troy. See ya.
All right. Take care, Jay.
Bye-bye.